after a while, again, I spent several months sort of just steeping myself in this. Had a moment where I can very vividly remember sitting on my bed, and I think I just read some more of these testimonies, and I just kind of threw my hands up and said, gosh, I feel like somebody's got to do something.
I'm Merrill Matthews, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and you are going to be glad you tuned in today. In this hour, this is a program I've been wanting to do for a little while. We've got in studio with us Jordan Campbell. He is a graduate of Washington Lee University, then got his law degree from Southern Methodist University, worked in law practice for a little while, for about 10 years. But here, about a little over a year ago, he started a new practice it's called Campbell Miller Payne, and we're going to be talking about what he works on there, which is helping detransitioners, those who are transitioning back to their original state who had transgender care, or what they call gender-affirming care, to help them and help them file lawsuits against the health practitioners and others who have engaged in that. Jordan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Merrill.
Well, tell us now. You left. You were working with a law firm, a couple of them, I think, over time, but you left in April of last year. Tell us about that story. Why you decided to make that change?
Yeah, thank you. So I was, like you said, I practiced for about 10 years. One at a big law firm downtown, and then left to be a partner at a more boutique law firm here in Dallas. And I was very happy there, practicing commercial litigation, so big sort of business disputes, antitrust litigation. And if you'd asked me a year and a half ago where I'd be in 25 years, I'd say, oh, I'm going to be at Brown Fox, my old firm. I loved it. It's a great spot. But around a year and a half ago, I would say for whatever reason, and you can put quotes on that, but there's a lot of unexpected coincidences and what I think most would call providence. Exactly. I was looking to listen to a podcast when I was walking my dog and trying to find something new, and stumbled on one where the topic of sort of gender affirming care, as it's called, or just the sort of trans agenda, as it were, at large, and particularly as it pertains to children, was the subject. And again, for whatever reason, that just sent me down an intellectual rabbit hole. And so over the next couple of months, I just kind of immersed myself in anything and everything I could. Academic literature, scientific studies, news articles, and then probably most influentially, I stumbled upon the detrans subreddit. And as somebody, I'd never even been on Reddit before, but it is a online community, for the listeners who aren't familiar, of what are known as detransitioners. So you sort of sketched it out in the intro, but those are individuals who at one point identified as transgender, and went into some sort of gender affirming care procedure. So whether that's just, and I'm going to put quotes on that, but just social transition, so name change and whatnot.
Because there's levels of this.
Yes, exactly. The next sort of level is medicalization, so cross-sex hormones and or puberty blockers, which have horrific effects, as you can imagine, not side effects, because that's the intended outcome. And then, of course, there's the most dramatic level, which is surgeries, and there's various different forms of those. And so it's this online community, and I kept seeing these testimonies over and over and over again, very similar stories, and they're all utterly heartbreaking. And it's, extremely vulnerable, typically teenager or child, who has a host of mental health comorbidities. So we're talking about autism, we're talking about severe anxiety depressive disorder, PTSD. A lot of them are victims of sexual abuse as children or as minors, or severe trauma, on a lot of early exposure to very graphic online pornography is another player. And so you get these various reasons where you could imagine a child might feel uncomfortable in her body. And instead of getting care, they go to see the experts, and the experts tell them and or their parents that they're going to commit suicide if they don't get on board with identifying as being trans. And so these people eventually wake up, is what I kept seeing over and over. And after a while, again, I spent several months sort of just steeping myself in this. had a moment where I can very vividly remember sitting on my bed, and I think I just read some more of these testimonies, and I just kind of threw my hands up and said, gosh, I feel like somebody's got to do something. And very vividly can remember it felt like kind of, God hit me on the forehead and just said, well, dummy, why do you think I just showed you all this stuff? So go do something. And so that's when I got the idea, or rather he gave me the idea to, use my training, my abilities and skills that I've been gifted with as a lawyer and as a litigator to do something on what I believe is one of the great evils in our society. And so I got the idea to represent detransitioners, this class of individuals I previously didn't even know existed, and pursue what, when I put my lawyer hat on, felt like very obvious, medical malpractice and or other, fraud, for instance, lawsuits. And so that's sort of how I came to do it, is just saw a need and heard a calling and said yes. And so here we are.
This started April of last year.
Yes, sir.
So what's happened in the roughly, 14, 15 months since you started?
Yeah. So originally, as I said, the goal was to exclusively represent detransitioners. It is altered a little bit, where I would say we are exclusively, and we're the one and only firm in the country doing this, exclusively dedicated to representing detransitioners, and I would say others also harmed by radical gender ideology. And
that's the expansion, others also harmed.
Exactly. So what that looks like, we represent a whistleblower up in the Pacific Northwest, Tamara Pitsky. You can read her piece in the Free Press in a follow-up article in the City Journal, and not surprisingly, she has now been the subject of 2 separate State Department of Health investigations ever since she did that.
I saw that article.
Yeah. And then we also will be soon representing a group of California women's prisoners who are plaintiffs in a lawsuit challenging California's bill that says that any male can say I'm a woman and get transferred to a women's prison. And shockingly, a number of those are sex offenders, and you can imagine the trauma and the harm that can cause. So we'll be representing them. And generally speaking, I would say kind of wherever the law and the gender overlap, those circles cross in the Venn diagram, we kind of have found ourselves. So a lot of conversations with state attorneys general's offices, with legislators, both at the state and federal level, just in terms of, what we can do to help them or how they can help us, but effectively sort of combat this growing problem.
And Jordan, this is a big problem these days. I was just looking at some of the data that we have on a Dallas Morning News article that highlighted you, which is available on pointofview.net. If you want to go look at that, that's available there. You can find out more about Jordan Campbell and the law firm and the work that they're doing there. But it said between 2017 and 2021, the number of people who are identifying, considering transgender care, identifying as a different sex, grew by 278%. That's a huge number, with an estimated 1 to 1.6 million people feeling that they are engaged in what we call gender dysphoria, not sure that they are the gender that they were born at. It's a growing problem, and you're seeing that. Yeah,
and one of the things that, again, sort of drew me in when I was finding out about all this is the numbers game. And so if you back up, and you just described 2017 to 21, but if you back up and sort of take a more historical look at it, the trans identifying population through the 90s, early 2000s comprised about 0.001% of the population. And within that, it was over 90 to 95% were adult males identifying as female. Fast forward, and starting in the early and especially in the mid 2000s, and obviously continuing on today at an exponentially growing rate, depending on the study you look at, you'll see anywhere from 1 to 3% of the population. So that's a multi-thousand-fold explosion. And instead of being 90 to 95% adult males, you're now seeing majority are minors, and within that, about 70+% are girls.
And that's a real change there, isn't it? I mean, it went from males to primarily young girls.
Exactly, and it's a change like that. There's no natural explanation for it. Abigail Schreier, for those who are listening who are unfamiliar with her work, has done a tremendous job sort of chronicling and following this, both in her book Irreversible Damage, which I would encourage everybody to read, and then just her independent journalism work. But she has really covered this, and I don't know if she coined the term, but the term rapid onset gender dysphoria, which is a now an increasingly becoming recognized sort of medical or scientific term to recognize this phenomenon of young children, girls, who have never exhibited any sort of trans characteristics in their life, and then suddenly when they're 14, 15, 16 years old in a group of friends, all of a sudden announce that they're transgender. Do we think social media plays the primary role here or something else? Social media is a huge factor. It's universally in all of our client stories, it's involved. And as again, I said, some of the other mental health comorbidities, one of the shocking ones and sad is almost all of our clients are autistic. And if you start looking at the numbers, there's a massive overrepresentation of autistic individuals that are, exhibiting gender dysphoria, or identifying as transgender. But then the reason I mention that is because, the marriage of social media and hyperfixation, when some of our clients or these individuals, they get this idea implanted, well, then they hyperfixate it and they dive fully in. And social media is absolutely where they go to learn more and then connect with what I would call groomers, but what some would call elders in the trans community. And it is a huge, huge player in the space. Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about some of the people you represent. Are these mostly children, or at least children when they started the detransition? Do you represent adults now, or are some of these adults after they transitioned and then now they become adults and they want to detransition? It's the last one you just mentioned there is typically our client. So I'll just back up a second, Merrill, and say, we've been open for just over a year, and in that time, with zero marketing or anything, we've now talked to over 70 potential clients, and I just heard from a potential new case this morning as well. So, and have filed 12 lawsuits and have 2 more in the hopper. So you're looking at an average of basically 1 lawsuit a month. And I only mention that just to sort of show that the problem is real and it's there and there needs to be a solution. The typical client is a minor when they get sucked into this, when they start identifying as trans. And again, they have a history of all those problems we touched on in the last segment, the PTSD, anxiety, depressive disorder, suicidal ideation, sexual abuse, all the things I mentioned a moment ago. That's typically in the background. And then they go online, again, as kids, as teens, and get sucked into this, go to see the experts, and and typically their parents as well will go, and they are essentially emotionally blackmailed by being told if your kid's going to commit suicide if you don't get on board. And then they have now the problem is it takes typically years to sort of wake up. And so most of them are young adults now that we represent, who either, like I said, as teens or potentially 18 or 19-year-olds is when maybe they started medicalizing. But the stories typically start in the mid-teens. And these primarily the people who've been medicalized, that is puberty blockers or something of that nature, or have actually undergone surgery, right? Right. And what's the percentage? I mean, because you really can't, if you've taken puberty blockers, that creates problems for you later on. It's not like you can just, I stop taking them and I will return to my normal self then. Yeah, no, that's the one of the great lies that the other side, for lack of a better term, has propagated is puberty blockers specifically are, quote, completely reversible. That is an absolute outright lie and categorically false. But that is what is literally told from medical providers to parents. It's what the American Academy of Pediatrics, that's what their official policy statement describes them as, completely reversible. You'll hear the term just hitting pause on puberty, like you're playing a record or playing a CD. You just hit pause and you can just pick it back up after you've had more time to explore. But it has devastating effects, long-term physical effects. And when you combine it with cross-sex hormones, which over 95% of kids that get put on puberty blockers for gender-related issues go on to receive cross-sex hormones. So that's also never discussed. But that combination almost always will render a child, a young adult, infertile. And so, and then that's separate and apart from just the horrific effects that, taking loads of testosterone on a teenage girl will have on her body.
The medicalization and surgery, the transgender affirming care industry has exploded, hasn't it?
It is a massive business here in the U.S. Because, as you can imagine, if you're having this exponential increase in trans-identifying patients, well, there's going to be where there's supply, or excuse me, where there's just
demand.
A classic supply and demand. Yes, thank you. And so certainly there has arisen a entire niche sort of medical practice of providing quote unquote gender affirming care, which between us, I think, is one of the great, most horrific euphemisms of our time. It is anything but. But it is, make no mistake, a multi-billion-dollar industry.
And are these doctors pushing this, or is it healthcare clinics and hospitals pushing it? Pharmaceutical companies? Who's behind this?
That, Merrill, that could be the subject of another hour-long discussion. At the end of the day, it's a whole slew of actors, right? The pharmaceutical companies, I would imagine, certainly have a motivation, because if you put a patient on, let's just say, cross-sex hormones, take a girl, put her on cross-sex hormones, after a few years, you have created a lifelong patient. Because if they continue to identify as trans, well, they're always going to need that prescription. But if they detransition and say, oh my gosh, what have I done, or what was done to me? Oftentimes their body has lost its ability to naturally produce estrogen. And so they'll need estrogen prescription for the rest of their life. So there's a huge economic incentive, as you can imagine, from the pharmaceutical industries. And then from the individual doctors, hospitals, gender clinics. There's over 300 pediatric gender clinics in the U.S. today, which is up from 1 in 2007. And so, yeah, there's a lot of financial motivation for a lot of different actors.
What about psychiatry and psychologists? Where are they playing roles in this?
They're also deeply involved. Obviously, this is a mental health crisis. And it
really is a mental health crisis. These people you pointed out, these people start out with mental health issues before they ever seek to detransition.
That's
or
right.
Transition initially.
That's right. And what happens in our clients' cases, and for so many, unfortunately, out there, is they should be getting mental health treatment for all those underlying problems, the trauma that stems from sexual abuse as a child, or their severe anxiety and depressive disorder, their autism. And instead, they are co-opted by ideologues who abandon all pretense of actual medical practice or science in sort of the name of an ideology. And so there certainly in a lot of our lawsuits, some of the defendants are the psychiatrists or the therapist or the psychologist.
Now, if I'm a parent and I have a child, and the child maybe I've helped the child transition, maybe I have a child who's thinking about that, and they want to get in touch with you, what do people do? What's the process with reaching out to you for this?
Yeah, the easiest way to do it would just be to go to our website. You could go to detranslaw.com, DETRANS law.com. That'll take you to our website. There's a contact us form there. You could also call the phone number listed. But the easiest one is just to write into our website. That's how we have a number of our most recent clients. And in fact, I believe in 30 minutes have an interview with a potential new client who wrote into the website. So that's probably the easiest way for anybody who is interested or potentially a victim to get in contact with us.
And what happens if I do that? You just reach out to them, or do you screen them? I assume you probably get more than you want to handle. Do you sort of choose we can handle this many?
We so far we have, so we'll get back to you no matter what, whether that's via email, and then typically we'll set up a phone interview or a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams is what we have. Interview. And to date, we have talked to everybody that has written into the website as a potential client. We've had other interesting submissions where we may not need to follow up, but yes, if it's a potential client, then we've been able to talk to everybody.
And how have others responded to you? Let's say the gender affirming care organization. Industrial complex. How have they responded to what you've been doing?
So I would say, generally speaking, and maybe it's because we live here in Texas, but have had positive feedback and reactions from, most folks that we have heard from, and a lot of that was, one of the first things I heard when I was reaching out to everybody I could identify as sort of a player in this space. Was sort of, it's about time. We've been waiting for lawyers to come in on this. So that was one of the initial reactions. We have gotten some, hate mail, I guess maybe is the right term. And we knew that was coming. And frankly, I think a lot more of it's going to happen the more lawsuits we file, and especially as we start getting some wins. The other side is prone to at least threats of violence. And so we take certain safety measures, but generally speaking, we've had very positive feedback.
You've not settled any cases yet, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, in many cases, when these kinds of issues come up, the attorneys for this side say, let's go and settle before we don't go to trial for this. Is any of that going on right now, or is it still just looking at pressing the legal aspect of it?
Yeah, so the overwhelming majority of civil lawsuits settle. And tough to tell, we're still early on in most of the life stages of our lawsuits, because at least the way we like to look at it is if you don't have the facts and the other side doesn't have the facts, then argue the law. And if you don't have the law, then argue whatever you can. And so but most of our suits have been a little bit bogged down in what I would say procedural purgatory, pending early motions. And so we haven't gotten deep into the discovery, which is where they take the depositions and the testimony. It's typically after that phase that parties will start having earnest settlement discussions. Whether our cases settle, I couldn't tell you. I think obviously it's a two-way street. So even if the other side wants to settle, our clients would have to agree, and I don't know if any of them would want to, frankly. One of the things that is most inspiring to me about our clients is I have never had, in any of our conversations, has the subject of damages or amount of money come up. That's financial motivation just isn't there. Universally across the board with every client that we represent or that we have spoken to and been unable to represent, the motivation is, I don't want what happened to me to happen to somebody else. So if I can do something to stop that, then I'm willing to do it. So when we talk about settlement, they may just say, no, I'm sorry, but this is about right and wrong, and we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Benjamin in Georgia. Benjamin, you're on the air.
Hello, how you doing today, Merrill? Thank you all for having me. Great show. I had three quick questions. Asking Mr. Campbell, does he speak outside of Texas to ministries or district meetings for ministries around the U.S., or are they just in Texas right now?
Very good question.
Yeah, so broadly speaking, we're located here, and our headquarters are in Texas, here in Dallas. Our cases are across the country. So we've got cases from the Northeast to the Midwest to the West Coast and here in Texas. And so we will go to different events or certainly obviously hearings wherever our work takes us. As far as speaking, we've done a little bit of that, but again, we're still pretty new. So I certainly would be willing to listen to any inquiries and have gone to a number of conferences and spoken a little bit. So all that's to say, we're not confined to Texas, and I guess we'd be just willing to listen to any opportunity.
And Benjamin, your other questions. Yes. Let's see. One is the next one is how to support monetary-wise, word of mouth, or in the military, we call it non-lethal targeting when we're trying to help areas by building public works, teaching how to do refuge stations and all this stuff. But what about safe space targeting? Like how do we reach out to these people? How can we support as y'all build out? Sounds
another good question.
Yeah, great question. So the selfish plug is there's a donate button on our website for anybody who wants to sort of help our clients' cases along, and all that money goes to the costs of litigation, which are extremely expensive. It can cost well into the six figures to bring just one of these cases because of the different fees and court costs and expert fees. So that's one way to help our clients. Specifically, more broadly on this issue, there's several nonprofits that you can give to, and especially if you earmark, hey, I want this to go towards this cause. One, just the probably primary one, is called the Themis Resource Fund. It's a new nonprofit, and it is essentially just raising a war chest to help fund these lawsuits. Another is Wolf, the Women's Liberation Front, which is helping support two of our lawsuits financially. And then generally to groups like ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, Child Parental Rights Group is another nonprofit that you could give to that are also sort of helping fight these fights. But those are just various different ways you could sort of leverage your money to help out on this cause.
Benjamin, we got about a minute left before the break. What's your third question?
That's it. I think pretty much he answered that one also already with sponsorships. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin.
Thank you, Benjamin.
Those are some good questions.
Yeah.
But you do have a number of groups that are out there trying to help support the work, then, it sounds like.
Yes. It's, this issue has, I feel like in the past, couple years really risen into the public prominence, and the more the people are sort of seeing what's happening, much like myself, it's almost like a visceral reaction. And, oh my gosh, what can I do? What can I help? How can I help? And that's sort of how some of these groups have come up. Another one I should mention is Partners for Ethical Care, and they have a effort called Transition Justice. You can go to transitionjustice.org to see that. But they're another group that would be a great place to send some money.
So you've got a number of people who have transitioned. They're wanting to detransition. A lot of these, I suspect, have at least somewhat similar stories. Can you do a class action suit? Because I often hear about class action suits. Can you combine them together and do class action?
Yeah, that's a very common question. The short answer is unlikely, and there's various reasons for that, but it has to do with how class certification is granted in the courts. And the big problem is, one, you don't have the same defendants in each case, but two, there's the damages are all different, and class actions are often, you want them to get a big class of individuals who all have essentially the same damage. So like when I tried to cancel my LA Fitness membership, thank you, some years ago, and couldn't because they had a crazy scheme. It turns out I later found out I was a member of a class, but we all had essentially the same damages. And in these cases, they're all various, they're different. And so there's several different reasons, but it's unlikely that you'd see class action spinning out of this. Now, what you could see, Merrill, is what are called MDLs, multi-district litigations, which is a modern judicial creation to essentially fill the gap between a bunch of one-offs and class certification, class actions, which are hard to get to, but you've got a bunch of the same type of cases. And so there's a modern judicial construct called a multi-district litigation, which essentially groups them all together, and then it's controlled by a panel. And then certain bellwether cases are selected to be tried, and it's sort of set the bar for what the outcome of the rest of these cases will likely be. So there is a mass action mechanism that may come into play.
So what's the remedy here? Because if most of these people, you can't go back. They can't get back to where they were initially, so they can't be made whole in a sense. So are you looking for these are civil lawsuits, so there's no criminal penalty, I guess, involved. So are you looking for monetary? Are you looking to shut down some of these places? What's the goal here?
Yeah, the goal. So for our clients, the goal is justice. Obviously, I know that's a generic or sounds like the Sunday school answer, but it is for a lot of them just a jury looking at them and saying what was done to you is wrong and what these people did was wrong is a goal. And as you mentioned, these are civil suits, and so a civil suit by definition, the only recovery that you can get out of it is monetary damages, and it's the best that our court, that our country has in terms of making whole something that can't be. And so, we intend to ask a jury to put a number on that to say, hey, for what was done to this young woman whose body will never be the same, put a number on that. Mm-hmm. And so that's the one goal from the individual level, or I guess the couple of goals. More broadly speaking, you mentioned ending the practice. I do think there is a chilling effect that even just the presence of lawsuits, the filing of lawsuits, can have on the industry, and particularly the insurance angle. Mm-hmm. And so insurance carriers are both covering, let's say, these procedures, gender-affirming care, again, right, quote unquote, whether that's hormones, whether that's surgery. And then they're also, on the other end of the spectrum, they're providing the malpractice insurance, the doctors that are engaging in this. So as more and more lawsuits increase, the insurance carriers will likely, and we've started to see this already over the last year, they're either going to stop offering that malpractice insurance, or they're going to make the rates prohibitive for such coverage, or they're just going to stop covering these procedures because there's way too much financial risk. And so that's a potential outcome as well. We
were talking earlier about the notion of settlements and so forth. My guess is if I were an attorney representing some of these clinics or physicians or whoever, the notion of having a person who is a minor on a witness stand talking about all the damage that has been done, I would be scared to death that a jury listening to that, just even if I'm right in this, a jury would be very, very sympathetic to these clients.
Yeah, you and I have the same thoughts. As a former defense attorney myself, I would never, if I were on the defense, never let this get to a jury, because it's exactly what you just sort of latched onto. Our client stories are devastating and they're heartbreaking, and the defendant's actions are, universally bad. They don't comply with any standard of care. And so, yes, if I'm a defense on the other side, I would do anything and everything I could to try to not let a jury get this.
Are there states that are looking at passing legislation limiting this practice, the transgender practice?
Yes. So all over the past few years, nearly half the states in the country have adopted some sort of regulation on this, including our state here in Texas just in the past year. And typically what that looks like is a ban, but just a legislation that says that it is illegal for a practitioner to offer cross-sex hormones or surgery for gender dysphoria or gender-related distress to minors. And then there's various levels and different things that may be tacked onto it. But that's sort of at its simplest what has been enacted around the country.
For parents who are seeing their child sort of engage or move towards wanting to move to transgender, what would you suggest? What should they be doing? What should they be considering?
Yeah, and I know we don't have much time. I would just say a couple quick things. One, for most people who may be like me, who would think, man, the parents must be villains in this case, I would tell you that is typically not the case. Most often, parents are the victims. They're just regular people who have no idea what to do when their child says this, and then they are just as victimized when they go to see experts who tell them their kid's going to commit suicide if they don't do it. So almost across the board, what we have seen are the parents are victims very much in the same. So I just want to mention that. But as far as, I would just say, be involved parents. Be know your kid. Most of our clients come from broken homes with well-intending parents, but they're absent or don't have the time. And so, just know your kid, be involved, coach their teams, anything and everything. But
give us that website again.
Which one? Our website?
Your website.
detranslaw.com is where you can go.
So if you're interested, you can reach out to detranslaw.com. We also have information on the Point of View website for you. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
Very interesting.
Thanks for joining us. And I hope you again have appreciated all that we've talked about today. And don't forget that if you would like more information about what we're talking about, you can find it at the website pointofview.net. That's all we have for today. We look forward to seeing you next time right here on Point of View Highlights.